Dr. Noor undertook her undergraduate studies in biological sciences at the University of Edinburgh. In 2003, she moved to pursue her PhD at the laboratory of Dr. Lawrence Banks in Trieste, Italy, where she investigated the role of human papillomavirus encoded protein during oncogenesis. In 2009, Dr. Noor moved to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York for her postdoctoral fellowship training, after which she relocated in 2013 to establish her own group and her own laboratory at the University of Edinburgh. There, she continues her interest in studying and investigating the molecular biology of autophagy and its relevance in aggressive cancer models such as glioblastoma. During my stay in Italy, Dr. Banks, he indicated to me that one of his best graduate students he ever had was Dr. Noor. So please welcome Dr. Noor Gammoh. Our Vice Dean, Dr. Manar Lawama, she has a symbolic gift for you from the University of Jordan. So you can receive it. That's for you.
So honored and pleased to have Dr. Noor. I wasn't expecting. The floor is yours now.
All right.
I'll try not to talk much and leave as much time for questions. I was thinking whether I should speak in Arabic or English, but the first time I met Dr. Belal, after 10 minutes, he looked at me and said, Noor, you can speak in English, it's okay. So I'm going to speak in English today. It just takes me time to switch between English and Arabic. But my hope today is to tell you my story, not to say that my story should apply to everybody, but to say that it is possible to have a career in science, even if you're Jordanian or from any developing country. But I also need to be careful to say that not everyone is able to take the exact same steps. So just take this as being an example rather than the only way of doing things. Dr. Belal spoke a bit about my journey, so I'll just touch upon it a bit. I traveled quite a bit around the world to pursue my career, and the first step was really in Trieste. So I do think that having opportunity at the ICGEB really permitted me to continue and start my career, and without that good start, I wouldn't have been able to continue my journey. So I hope you all could get the gist from today that a center like the ICGEB is an important place to consider as an opportunity to apply for. So I started in Trieste, moved to the US for my postdoc, and now I'm currently based in Edinburgh as a group leader. And this is just pictures of Edinburgh. On a nice day, we only take pictures when it's nice. So this is the city here, and this is our research center, which is really composed of 3 different institutes. And my office is somewhere here. This is my lab. I currently have 2 PhD students and 2 postdocs. And I thought to touch a bit about what kind of research we do. It's primarily looking at basic biological pathway. We look at autophagy as a mechanism which cancer cells can use to develop resistance against therapy and to grow indefinitely. So we want to understand the basic mechanism of resistance pathways in cancer cells, try to look at pathways that we can inhibit in preclinical studies, and hopefully develop small molecule inhibitor to target these pathways. And we're primarily looking at brain tumors as our example cancer. So now I'm going to talk a bit about my experience, but also try to give a bit of advice for the younger career scientists of how to take these initial steps into science. And when I was putting these slides together, I was almost remembering when I was applying for PhD positions. I applied to a lot of positions before I could get one. And the most of the responses I got was, you're a foreigner, we don't have sufficient fund to support sort of the extra funding that is implicated because I'm not British, for example, or European. And I remember quite clearly the day when I received an email from Lawrence expressing his interest in my application, that he's willing to consider it. And that was around 2003 when I was applying. Again, just emphasizing that the ICGEB is a really great place to be applying for and considering whether it's for the program grants that Dr. Vittorio was speaking about or for applying for PhD positions. I don't know if you will be speaking about those. Right, so what are the obstacles of taking those first steps, whether you're at undergraduate or master's student, and mainly to think of pursuing a PhD in science, but also possibly taking a training, whether you're a medical student. I think I spoke to some medical students earlier today, or perhaps if you're interested in applying for a master program. So the most obstacle that I found was that there's very limited funding for international or foreign students. And also, many of us would start research with very little experience. I remember I barely knew how to hold a pipette when I first started doing or applying for jobs or PhD positions. So really, there's limited positions, and we may start with very limited experience. Language can be an obstacle, especially if you're thinking of going somewhere in Europe. There's a lot of countries with many different languages. I wouldn't perhaps say it's a big obstacle, but it's something that is required in order to go to any countries. And then competition with local candidates is perhaps something that we need to think about as Jordanians or from the Middle East. How can we compete with local candidates for these limited positions? And just some of the solutions that I was thinking of, perhaps the one way that I took was to do as many applications as possible. So this is just trying to emphasize the need to really apply and continue applying to as many labs and positions as you can see. And that's also true for grant applications. You want to apply as many places that you're eligible to apply to in order to increase your chances. Sometimes a previous training can help. So if you're applying for a master or for a PhD position, a master can help to gain experience and to make contacts. And then for me, I found that specialized institutions where places would accept international students is important, especially the ICGEB, where Jordan is one of the member countries. Right, so again, just to emphasize what are important aspects to think about. Sometimes people come to me and said, oh, I applied for a few labs and I didn't hear anything. Well, you need to apply more. Just try as much as you can to be persistent and contact as many labs you are interested in. I would say also obtain as much experience beforehand, because now the competition is just increasing. People are coming into research positions with more and more experience. So if you're able to find positions in Jordan where you can have a little bit of lab research, that will be important. Now as a PI, sometimes I get emails from people. They don't really know what I'm working on. They will cite a paper that I was maybe a middle author, or just it's clear that they don't know what they're applying for. So if you're applying for a lab, make sure you spend at least half an hour or an hour familiarizing yourself with what this lab is doing and why you're interested in applying, and make sure that the email you write is very specific to that lab. So that's the next point, is when you write emails, make sure that you write it in a way that you show and demonstrate your interest to the lab that you're applying for. Because at the end of the day, most of us get so many emails a day. We're busy. We have so much other things to do. So when I receive an email, I want to know that the person who wrote the email spent as much time writing it as the time I'm going to spend replying to it, or at least reading it. So try to write as much as you can specific. I like the word concise, which Dr. Vittorio used quite a few times. Doesn't have to be 20 pages because no one will read those. But be clear, and I'm happy to speak to people one-on-one on how to write these emails, because I think they're really key ways you can attract attention of your receiving lab. And then the other thing I would say is explore as many options as you can. You don't know what you're interested in until you enter that field. I thought I really want to specifically study specific topics, but actually it doesn't matter at the end. Research is often interesting because we develop knowledge and we increase our understanding. So the actual topic of research, it could be bacteria A or bacterium B, or pathway A or pathway B. But at the end, it's important to be also open to different options in terms of what is the research topic you're interested in. And the last one I would say is knowledge now over the internet is accessible to everyone, and especially open access research papers should be accessible to many of us. So I would say try to spend as much as you can familiarizing yourself to what is new, what is the recent topics that are being published on, or what are the new hot topics. And I think this is something that you can train yourself without the need or dependency on anyone else. Talk to your friends, discuss papers together. I think that's one of the key ways to develop scientific thinking. And that will come through as you apply and contact people. When you have interviews, you will be asked what are the recent or general research topics that you've been reading about. I will speak a little bit about how to pick the right lab, and these are things that I considered as I was applying for both my PhD and my postdoc, how to pick the right lab, because at the end of the day, it's not also about getting a PhD from anywhere or getting an experience anywhere. Finding the right lab is actually quite important as well. And perhaps the first consideration I would put in my mind is publication record. Does the lab publish well? And do I know that if I have an experience in that lab, especially as a PhD student, would I have a good publication record? Because this is really going to be my tool and my kind of certificate in order to pursue it and continue my research, and also apply for grants and so forth. Research question and method. Again, I said try to be open as much as you can. It's more about developing skills, way of thinking, and rather than the actual specific method. And the one thing we also talked about during lunchtime is if you're thinking of coming back to Jordan, that's an important thing to think of, is what are the skills you need in order to come back to Jordan. I did the mistake of going to a research topic involving basic molecular research that wasn't really popular or needed in Jordan, and that made it difficult for me to come back here. But do think about what are important research questions or skills that you need to develop. You can speak to your doctors, to your professors about it. For example, genetic sequencing might be something that you can use here in Jordan and outsource outside, using clinical samples, ways that can be applicable to the need of our country. And maybe more trivial aspects is the language. Make sure that the lab can speak in Arabic, or if you're English, or if you're fluent in any other language, that you're able to communicate with that lab. The ICGEB, the official language is English, so language wouldn't be there a problem. And then city and life, you know, at the end you are leaving your country, and you will be away from your family, so the city and the place you will be in will be important. But I know many of you, if you're eager enough to pursue your research, these aspects might be a bit secondary. I'd like to touch a bit about what are the challenges that face us when we go abroad, because at the end of the day, I know many of you want to travel outside Jordan to pursue research, but actually it can be also a difficult time. So it's important to be aware of that and equipped. You might go to a lab where you end up being given a difficult project. You might be not supervised well, so you might be left alone to do work. I've seen people, even in our own institute, where there's been a lack of supervision. The other issue might be that when you consider coming back to Jordan, you might find that there are limited positions for you. So this is something to definitely keep in mind. And again, I will touch up, I think culture and language difficulty is important, because I have seen people who struggle with these things. Now, there are always things that are put in place to face if any of these struggles come. So for example, difficult projects, there's often PhD committees and other sort of professors that you can talk to, which can help direct projects if your main supervisor was unable to basically help you with your own projects. But I think these are important things to keep in mind, especially in terms of the next steps. What will you do after you finish your training experience? If you want to come back to Jordan, you want to already think about how you're going to take that step. I thought at the end to just end with a positive note about my own experience at the ICGEB. It was extremely important and an excellent time in my career, and it really helped me take the next steps and the steps after, just having a very good and solid research experience during my PhD. And I really think having Dr. Lawrence Banks as my supervisor, he really pushed me and made sure that when I finished my PhD, I would have as many opportunities as I can to take the next steps. So the first key thing, as I said before, was having good publications. And I looked at my publication records and I realized that many of them actually came out from my PhD. So you can see here, I came out with 3 first author papers, and these are just 2 other research papers that I was a middle author in. But I think having a supervisor who promotes or realizes the importance of having publications in a PhD level is quite important. The other thing that I was also fortunate to have is to be able to go to as many meetings. And I think that developed my scientific personality, where I can speak to people about my science and discuss ideas and also ask questions in meetings. I think that was something quite important to develop. And here again is a list of examples of meetings that I went to where I was able to present orally or as posters. But there's also like a couple of the ICGEB ran courses that I was able to go to and develop some of my skills that are not necessarily directly related to my PhD. So that's really to do with skills such as, I think I went to a bioinformatics course, and, which was maybe not directly related to my research, but nevertheless important. The other thing about the ICGEB and also the environment that you would want to apply for is that it's very collaborative. So I remember there's an ICGEB day, symposium day, where everybody talked about their research. And again, I think these are important things because at the end of the day, your research is not about pipetting and doing the bench work or the computer-based work, but it's about talking and presenting your work to other people. So being in a collaborative environment where you're able to do that and discuss ideas, exchange reagents is quite important. And I'm sure there's a lot of other positive things about the ICGEB that I couldn't think about, but at the end, it was really the first step that helped me to continue in my research. So as a final words, these are, this is a quote I actually bring up every time I give sort of a career talk, but I think it's quite important, and it's one that I also go back to when I'm maybe facing a difficult challenge. And it really says something that is applicable to all of us, is as scientists, young scientists who wish to become independent need to be able to see the rewards down the line, set their mind on it, and go for it. They remain calm, take things one step at a time, and know that if they pass all the individual hurdles, they will have a good chance of making it. We're not saying that there's no hurdles on the way, but there are ways also to move about it. And there's so many people that are willing to help you. So please come and speak to me or to Dr. Victoria or Lawrence, and I'm sure even Dr. Bilal is happy to help. And I'm happy to take as many questions as you guys have. So that's it. There.
If you have questions, Dr. Mamoon.
Thank you, very enlightening. I know that doing a PhD is full of failures, and it's one failure after another, and until you find the solution. And many people cannot overcome that. It affects them psychologically, and I've seen many people go crazy actually as they're doing their PhDs.
I might have faced that. No,
well, I've seen those. So how do you handle failures?
I think actually failures is the way you develop and you learn. So I think when things go well, you actually are not learning as much as when things aren't going well. There's the psychological aspect and the mental health aspect that we cannot underestimate. And often institution, I don't know if the ICGEB has any, but I can speak about the University of Edinburgh because I know more about it now. We do have sort of specialized people in handling mental health issues that people can speak to. Often I think the best way to handle any stress issues is to talk about it, whether it's directly to your mentor or people you can trust. And in terms of failed projects, what I do, at least with my students, is make sure that they have multiple projects going on, and that's exactly something I learned from Lawrence, is make sure you have multiple projects, riskier, and things that are more guaranteed. So I think there are often many ways around hurdles or like stress. The biggest stress is not to have a good relationship with your direct mentor. I think that's one that is hard to overcome. I've seen people going through that, but often many institutions have committees whereby a PhD student is not primarily supervised by the PhD supervisor, but there are other committees that observe, and there are opportunities where the student can express any need for additional supervision or help. So yeah, I think the hardest thing is not to be able to speak directly to your mentor, but there's ways around it. But if you're able to speak to your mentor openly, I think there's a lot of ways around difficult projects and failing projects for sure. Can take this.
It's working. Just to add, in ICGEB, every PhD student has a supervisor, of course, for the PhD project, but also has a tutor. So another PI that he or she chooses among the staff of ICGEB, and with this tutor, he or she can talk about anything to do with the PhD time, with private life, or if he or she has any problems with the supervisor. So we have this in place in ICGEB now. So we have a person to whom you can go and talk about anything that is not your supervisor.
See, you've taken these measures because I'm sure you've also seen some people go crazy. Yes, I know.
Okay. But, so I know in your lab you didn't have any Jordanian students, but has there been any other? Do I get to ask questions? Did the ICGEB get any other Jordanian candidates as a student? Okay, all right, yeah. You didn't want any more, did you? Like that's it.
You weren't here this morning and I showed the map of...
Okay.
You were not here this morning and I showed the map of where we have fellows from at the moment, and there's nobody from Jordan at the moment,
okay, yeah.
so
I think,
I'd like to rectify that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's potential candidates in this room, so that's what I'm hoping for. But yeah, I'll be around.
Do you have any other questions by the students? Yeah, of course you can ask.
You have the microphone.
Noor.
So actually, I'm a fourth-year bachelor student studying chemistry. So I was thinking after graduation, I want to apply for a fellowship so I can train in many different sectors in chemistry. So I can suppose myself to different topics in chemistry. So I can choose what's the topic that will be best for me. So do you recommend me to do this, or just go after a master and then PhD?
Right, so you want to look for a fellowship that will support you to do many different kind of
Yeah, it's kind of a
experiences.
training before applying for master and PhD.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure specific about chemistry. Chemistry programs might be different. But for example, in many PhDs in biological sciences, you can apply for a program where you can do a first-year rotation period, where you rotate in different labs before deciding which lab you want to work in. But I think, I mean, you will be needing to look at one institute that will provide those different topics. I think it will be difficult to have one fellowship that will take you to different parts of the world to do the different types of research. So I think you want to be careful not to be specific, because as you're progressing in your research, you know, and you're undergraduate, you're taking different topics of different research. But as you move forward, you're becoming more and more focused. So as you're taking that step, you want to think of, okay, do I want to do organic or inorganic chemistry? You know, just try to be a little bit more focused in that sense. But I'm not sure if PhD programs for chemistry does that. Many of them will give you an opportunity to do rotations in different labs before deciding to commit to one lab and you do your PhD in it. I don't think the ICGEB does that, right? Yeah. But that's something, I think, if I were you, I would also do my own research before you can decide on what specific topic you want to study by doing an online research and reading papers, for example, and that will help you decide, maybe I'm more interested in this than that.
The problem that I read a lot of papers, and that's why I'm so confused. Like, there's a lot of topics that are really interesting for me, but I'm a little bit scared because maybe when I'm gonna choose like a PhD position, I might not get the project or the subject that I really want. So,
but if you're applying directly to a lab, you would be able to specify the type of research that you're interested in. Is that correct?
yes, but I'm saying this because like I go around in my faculty and I ask doctors about their experience and how they ended up with their PhD position, and you know, not all of them chose like their PhD project, and that's why. Yeah,
I mean, the other thing about PhD is it doesn't limit you to the research topic. So I did my PhD in papillomaviruses, and I'm doing it. My lab's research now is a completely different topic. You know, it's related, of course, in terms of the cancer biology aspect of it. But PhD doesn't really limit you and restrict you to do one type of research. And it's trying to say is that you're really trying to develop skills and expertise and way of thinking rather than specialize in one topic. After your PhD, you can do postdoc and specialize further, but don't think that PhD will limit you to what kind of topic that you will be studying. Okay? It's really about developing skills and way of thinking.
And if I may add, you can also have some exposure to different research fields through your faculty at the University of Jordan, because the Department of Chemistry is a fairly large department, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, I'm interested now in CO2 capture and utilization, and it's a hot topic. It's interesting, but I don't know. Like, I might find another position for me or another topic that I'm really good at. And that's what I want, to find where's my perfect position.
Perfect. Is there a perfect position? Yeah, you can make, yeah. I think the only way for you to know is to try, right? And at the end of the day, again, once you develop that skill, you can decide if it's not for you, you can always change. So don't think that you're going to be limited to that research topic.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the main thing is to remember that you know, whatever it is you decide, it's going to be 3 or 4 years of your life. So before you do it, you know, make sure that what you're going to apply for is really what is really exciting you at that time.
All right, and with this we conclude our workshop for today. Thank you for coming, and thanks to our guests for traveling from Europe to be here with us. Thank you. Thank you.